right. Welcome back, everybody. Here to week 4 at BSBA. I'm your president, Colin Flintoff. We got an awesome guest today who was recently just in our shoes a few years back, Quinten Lepak. Welcome, Quinten.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for joining us. We're pumped to have you. So just real quick, looking a little bit at what our meeting is going to look like. Many of you have been here. You kind of know the drill. I'm going to introduce Quinten. He's going to talk a little bit more about his path to success so far in his career. Then I'll lead a little bit of a discussion, myself and our executive board. And then towards the end, we'll allow for 15 or so, probably more minutes of open audience question and answer. And we just ask that you please use the raise hand function during that time, or at any time, feel free to put your questions into the chat. And then after that, we'll let Quinten go and just go over a few announcements towards the end. And looking at Quinten and some of his experiences so far, he's currently a partnership activation coordinator at Major League Baseball, the MLB. He's, as we just noted, being in our shoes, he's a UCLA alum, class of 2020, where he received a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and also film, television, and digital media. While in his experience at UCLA, one of the many things he participated in while here, he did the study abroad program over at the University of Sussex for international business. Some of his other experiences include being a consumer products coordinator, where he was a project hire at the NFL. And he also went back there and interned doing media strategy and business development. He also did a similar type of function over at Spectrum Sportsnet, which is the home of the Lakers and the Dodgers. And he was also director of video production for the UCLA Spirit Squad. So even though he's only a few years older than us, as you can see, that's a pretty impressive resume there already. So I guess, Quinten, if you kind of share with us a little more about yourself, your path where you are today, and yeah.
Totally. Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, Colin, also. So give a little background. I'm born and raised in Westwood. So I'm very, very local. So knew from a young age that I wanted to go to UCLA. And then just part of my upbringing, my dad was always a big sports fan. So I got into the NFL, huge Packers fan. Being from LA, you got to be a Lakers fan. And then, of course, the Dodgers too. So just always knew I had the passion for sports. So then when I eventually got into UCLA, I remember vividly after my freshman year, like I was just normal pre-biz econ major. I remember after my freshman year, just walking the dog with my mom, and I was like, I can't imagine actually hitting the workforce in 4 years. Like it's so overwhelming. Like I don't even know where to begin. Wasn't super involved my freshman year. Like where do I even get started? So my first real job experience type event was Wells Fargo had a leadership conference my sophomore year, where it was, as a business major, I was like, okay, maybe I'll get started. This wealth management internship sounds interesting. So I went to the conference. It was in Phoenix, met a bunch of other different people who are our age, and then interviewed for a few jobs there and didn't get any of them. And I remember knowing that feeling. I was just like, I feel like a failure. I'm a sophomore. I don't know what direction my career is headed. I don't know exactly where I can get to the path I am, but I just put my head down and realized I think it's important to follow what you love. And I was like, I love sports. Like this is something I'm actually passionate about. I don't have to fake being interested. Like sometimes, like going back to banking, I was like, there's money. So yeah, sure, I'll do it. But I was always passionate about sports. So I applied to a bunch of different places. And one of them, fortunately enough, was Spectrum Sportsnet, which was in El Segundo. I met in person, just talked about, I was just honest, genuine about how much I love sports. The person interviewing me, ironically enough, was a Packers fan. So we really bonded over that. And that's where I got my first start, really got an understanding of the business. So I started there as a business development intern, working on their affiliate revenue model, just seeing how Spectrum as a network could improve their revenue stream and sort of license off different content, create new programming, just doing a lot of research and just learning as much as possible. If you're an intern, you just take in everything. You just got to be a sponge. And an important day when I was interning there was I read a sports business journal, 40 Under 40. So Sports Business Journal is one of the biggest business sports magazine. It is the biggest sports magazine in America. So I was reading about 40 different people under the age of 40, just different aspects. Because sports, a lot of people think, oh, you can be a broadcaster, you can be a player, coach, agent, and they think that's it. But there's so many different breadths of sports. So just getting an understanding and seeing, okay, I can do really anything after this internship and just pivot around. And I became inspired, like going back, that internship fueled me. I decided to pick up my minor in film, TV, digital media. It really helped me stand out more. And then that led me to ESPNU Campus Connection. That was just an online content program I did with ESPNU at UCLA. So I was on the sideline of the UCLA USC game my junior year when we won, and I was going crazy interviewing people at the tailgates, just stuff like that. And then also that through that, I got connected with the Spirit Squad because I do videography on the side. So just doing little things like that. And it's really just sports in general. I still, even though I got that good start, I still didn't know where to go. I still was passionate about football, but how can I get an internship here? There's 25,000 applicants a year at the NFL. And I just applied blindly in November. And then at this point, I'm abroad spring 2019. And I get an email from heaven in March, last week of March, like literally 5 months later, saying like, hey, like, do you have time to chat on the phone sometime today? Please let me know. And I was like, sure, I'm available at 12:30 Eastern, or it's like, I'm available all day. They're like, great, we'll call you at 12:30 Eastern. It was 12:28 Eastern when she sent that email. I was like, okay, I gotta be ready to go. Gotta be ready to go. So they called me and just everything flowed. It was a perfect fit. And again, I was just genuine about my passion for sport. The person who I talked to went to Stanford, friends with Ty Montgomery, who was a former Packer. I went to the game where he fumbled against the Rams and they lost, and we traded him the next day. We bonded over that in the call, just little things and just bonding over and just being passionate. Something that drove me. I took from there. I did a lot with content licensing and live sports betting, new streaming services, a lot of different hats there. But then again, my story continues. I graduated in 2020. Nothing in sports was being filled at all. I also was passionate about media, but you can't film anything either. So I found myself at a crux where do I go from here? And for a while, I was job hunting. I had all this experience and I felt incompetent because I was still job hunting, just trying to find anything that would work in sports. So I was reaching out to everyone on LinkedIn, connecting with them, just doing phone calls, hoping some connection would stick. A lot of them didn't help out at the time, but I got so much different advice from so many people. And eventually in January of 2021, almost a whole year after I graduated, that's when I reconnected with the NFL. They got me a temp role there. But again, they told me 4 months, that's it. You don't get anything past that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do whatever I can. In May, connecting with everyone, you got to connect. That's my biggest tip. Connect with everyone, even if it might seem small. Connect with everyone. At my team at the NFL, I connected with someone named Zayamada who worked at the NBA and MLB, just to pick her brain, just see how she liked it, everything, just understand what she was about. A week later, she said, hey, this job rolled across my desk at the MLB Partnership Activation Team. Would you be interested in hearing about it? It's in New York. Even though I know you're in LA, I was working remotely at the time from LA, East Coast hours from the West Coast. I interview with them, all 6 of them. Perfect job. And luckily, again, by the grace of God, like I got hired and they're like, you have to move cross country. Easy decision. Moved here and now I'm here. I know there's a long-winded story, but that's sort of just how I came to be. And I think working in sports, you just got to remember what you're passionate about. I love sports so much. And even today I was sitting in a meeting with Gatorade, is like one of our partners, and just saying like, wow, like this is what I'm doing for a living. Like this is so awesome. And it was not easy at all. Not easy. I don't recommend doing the exact path, graduating right during a pandemic, but it's my story. I ended up here. So happy to give any random tips of advice. I know there's still a lot I can talk about. So whatever you have for me, Colin.
Absolutely. Yeah. And don't worry about long-winded or anything. That was awesome. I appreciate you sharing all that. And it's really cool to see how that story, all comes together and things like that. And also how those random connections can just lead to who knows what and gets you where you are today. Right. One thing that just immediately stuck out to me right there, I wasn't necessarily planning on, which was that NFL thing. You had like no time to prepare. How did you go about doing that? And like, where was your mindset at, knowing like, I got like a minute or two to be ready for this important interview and things like that?
Yeah, usually. Okay. So whenever interviews happen, like I'm always looking to prepare, always like reading up on the company, not just the company, seeing the actual business people in those positions. So if, say you're interviewing for a business development role at the LA Clippers, you search Los Angeles Clippers, business development in LinkedIn, see who's there, read up on their resume, see where they went to school, everything you can. Usually I do that. But in this case, 2 minutes, I just sort of reflected on everything I did at Spectrum. What I did was also what I recommend doing if any job you do, try to compile a portfolio of everything you worked on. So I glanced at that and pulled it up on my computer because it was a phone interview. So we were talking about, there's one thing the NFL does in terms of revenue is like a broadcast network pays them a certain chunk of fee for rights. So I worked on that in Spectrum. So I had that pulled up and was talking about it. And she's like, wow, I didn't even know about that until I started here. That's amazing that you know about that. And I was just like, thank God I had my notes pulled up. So I think that was just, it was a spur of the moment thing, but I mean, you always got to be ready, and just attitude is everything. And she could tell, like, she knew she only gave me 2 minutes, but I was such in a positive attitude and just always wanted to talk about sports and improve the network. I mean, improve the NFL itself. So she really saw that. And it was the fastest, easiest interview process I had, ironically enough, even though it was the most applicants I compete against. So I was very fortunate.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And definitely, as you shared about that interview process, that's something we've talked about here in our club before, trying to be as prepared as possible. And good for you for thinking on the fly like that and just already kind of having it locked in. Would you say it's definitely maybe a good habit to review your resume here and there, or touch up on certain companies that you know you just kind of have a passion for if anything were to ever come available? What would you say to that?
Absolutely. I would say the biggest tip in terms of job hunting, resume hunting, first of all, always have your resume ready. And a big tip I have is put your resume on your LinkedIn portfolio. So if you look at someone's profile or reach out to them, they can see everything right away. A lot of times that what I realized while I was networking and like job hunting in 2020 is there's so many different people out there who are willing to help. So just literally reaching out, job titles that interest you, and reaching out, you offer to connect with them, but still send a note, because a lot of times people are like, okay, this random person wants to connect with me, whatever. But say you reach out to connect, say, hey, I'm Paul, senior at UCLA, really interested in what you do. If you have 15 minutes or any time at all, I would love that to connect with a call and just talk about like why you're interested. It's, again, you just give like a brief summary, but people go a long way. Another tip I was given when I was job hunting in 2020 is UCLA has an alumni function on the school page. So you can literally go to the UCLA alumni function and search any job, any company, and then it appears who from UCLA is currently working there, divided by city. So you can reach out and be like, hey, my name's Johnny. I go to UCLA currently, but I see you're out there. You're out there working at, even in non-sports. It'd be Google, like being like, I would love to just hear about what you do, like Bruin to Bruin, stuff like that is really what can help you. And then in terms of just actually interviewing, I feel like sometimes you might over prepare and might overwhelm yourself. So sometimes just reviewing what you've done, what you're passionate about. And then also the question you have to know how to answer is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's the most excruciating question, because even me right now, I don't know what I want to do in 5 years. Things are constantly changing. But just talking about your long distance direction, like what you're trying to strive to, is super important. Then of course you have to have questions ready to go. Like that's the one requirement. If they end the interview and you have no questions, you're not getting hired. You should have 4 or 5 questions written down specific to who's interviewing you. If you know that Colin's interviewing you, look up his entire background. Just like those are my biggest tips, I would say, is just do your research. Do your research 100%.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that big time. With regards to, like, let's say, for example, I myself reach out to some professional and connect with them and have a good little first informational interview. What would you say to maybe trying to like develop and actually maintain the relationship? Because obviously you don't want to, as unfortunately oftentimes happens, there's just a lot of one and dones. How do you go about kind of maintaining those relationships to continue?
That's a great question. That's something I'm always trying to work on. I think after you have those calls, definitely keep their contact information, send a thank you right away. But sometimes it's good to just follow up and say like, hey, thanks again for talking with me a few months ago. Just wanted to update you that I'm doing this right now. I'm working at this company. I'm studying this, but I still think about your advice that you've given me a long time ago. Or even just saying something like, hey, just want to check in. How are you? I appreciate all the advice you've given me. Paul, he connected with me for a call. I don't know how many months ago, but he still checks in and texts me, and I love it. I have your number saved, Paul. Also, you don't have to say, hey, it's Paul. Like, I got you. So I think just doing stuff like that, it really goes a long way. And not every connection is going to get you somewhere. Like some connections, you really just pick their brain and understand what they're about. They can't necessarily help you for a job, but it's always nice. You never know who knows who, and because they can always introduce you to someone too. If I connected with someone named Isabel, who is content strategy at Netflix when I was networking, and like I saw her entire background. I was like, that's amazing. And like I sometimes text her like, hey, hoping everything is going well. Like someone from the NFL just joined. But like again, I don't ask her for something every time. So just not being sure not to ask someone for stuff every time, just checking in, saying like, hey, just want to pop up in your inbox, see how you're doing, just random things like that. But it's definitely a balance of, you don't want to be overbearing and sort of overwhelm them or annoy them. But I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out Paul for doing that. That's awesome. It's definitely stuff we preach here at Biz, but always good to see fellow Bruins and executive board members doing that and whatnot. And also, I liked what you said too about not always asking for something every time, like actually just seeking to build a genuine relationship. Like, hey, how are you? You know, saw this interesting thing, was curious, maybe your thoughts on it or whatever.
Exactly.
So I like that. We got a good question here from Johnny in the chat regarding the 5-year thing, and that he's curious, is it best to imply that in 5 years you see yourself at that company you're interviewing with, or should you talk more about kind of what roles you see yourself in?
That's a good question. I really like that question. I would say you don't want to necessarily be like, I only say you're interviewing with the LA Rams in like data analytics. I think it's more fruitful to talk about the direction, how you want to be a data analyst in sports, whether it be a manager or senior manager or senior coordinator, and talk about that direction and talk about industry more. Because if you say, oh, I see myself at the LA Rams in 5 years, well, it's like, well, if you don't get hired, that might not happen. So I think broadening your net and being honest. You don't have to say, I think I'm going to be for a certain team. You can just say, I'm really interested in that, but not necessarily I'm willing to do anything within data analytics. I still struggle with that question, honestly, because it is a loaded question. But talking about the direction you see yourself going, I think is the most important thing you can say in those types of questions. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. And yeah, Johnny says he did that 2 weeks ago. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, Dominic's curious for the interview process if there's maybe some frequently asked questions that come up, and if so, what are they?
I mean, in sports, they're going to say, if you're interviewing at the NFL, why the NFL or why MLB? And the biggest thing you cannot say is, oh, I've been a fan my whole life. You can say that, but that cannot be your only answer, because you will get immediately thrown out. You can talk about, I think, when the why NFL or why sports question comes up, talk about a lot of their business aspects. Like if you're interviewing for the NFL, it's the Super Bowl is the biggest event in the entire world in terms of media reach in one sitting. I mean, you have different leagues. Baseball, 162 teams. It's the oldest sport out there. I mean, there's so much history and tradition, but you want to keep cultivating a new audience. How do you develop new technologies, or you can sort of cater it to the position you're interviewing for, but really talking about be excited about the business aspect of it. Because I mean, sports at the end of the day, like, yes, there are games, but there's so many different people that make it function, and talking about how you want to be one of those people that can contribute value, I think is something that's really important. Another one is, I'm trying to think other good questions. I mean, it really varies by interviews, but I would say, I mean, like, again, they look at their values too. Like when I interviewed with the NFL, it's like they had five pillars: respect, resilience, respect to teams, teamwork, resilience, and then just like, which one do you resonate most with? So doing your research on that. I mean, it really varies. They also talk about like, what are your biggest strengths and weaknesses? When did you overcome something that was challenging? And most of the time they just want to get to know you and your background. So if you're able to just bring in stories about different interesting experiences, it doesn't necessarily have to be applicable, as long as it's interesting and it shows that you had initiative. I think those are something important to highlight in interviews.
So for maybe some of us like juniors and seniors who have maybe done a considerable amount of interviews already, would you say most of the ones in the sports space are generally more behavioral type of interviews as opposed to like technicals or case type stuff?
100%. I mean, sometimes they say, I mean, it depends on the position. If you're doing something I keep going back to data analytics, like I'm not fluent in SQL or any of that. So, I mean, those might be more technical, but in the business development and the partnership activation side, those have been all behavioral, and just they hear about your experience, so they know what you bring to the table and like what you've done. Yeah. But most of the time they just want to get to know you. And I think, again, just stressing that you have a positive attitude and you're just passionate no matter what. I think that's like the biggest thing you can do for yourself, because people, they might not remember exactly what you said, but they remember your spirit and your positivity. So, I mean, I think that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And Arathi, I see your question. We'll get to that in a sec. I'm kind of curious if you could maybe speak a little bit as well to the importance of not only, being a student and passing at UCLA and graduating and whatnot, but how important it is to, try and be proactive in the campus community and things like that. Like, for example, I want to give a shout out to everyone on the call tonight. Like, you're obviously doing good things if you're here right now. Could you kind of explain how maybe those things are so good to talk about with professionals and people interviewing you?
Exactly, exactly. I mean, I was super involved on campus, a little too much at some point. Sometimes I was spreading myself thin, but like when you look back, it's like you're really making a difference and you're connecting with so many people. I mean, everyone on this call, I'm sure you guys are all tired, have fun events, everything, and it's super fun. Like I was in PAC on campus, sign up for dance marathon. Hate to be that kind of, no, I'm just kidding. But I mean, just doing stuff like that and like just say, hey, I put on this event that was, you're on your feet for 26 hours in Paul Pavilion and raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's something to like touch on no matter what you did. It's super impactful to say, even if you're in fraternity. I was the vice president of my fraternity, did recruitment chairman. That was a lot of work. So, like sometimes, again, too much, but I look back on seeing we recruited a class of 49 people in fall one year. It was just to look back and say you did that. It's again, a story you touch on, but again, you don't have to do everything you want just to show off on your resume. Just do stuff you're passionate about. I mean, college more than a time ever is to find what you really want to do. What kind of problems do you want to solve in the future is something you have to do, but you don't have to do all job related stuff. You can just have fun. Everyone in here loves business, obviously, but they're here because they like sports. Like they want to talk about sports, find stuff you're passionate about, take classes. I think a big regret I had at UCLA was I didn't take certain classes that I was super interested in. I was like, I don't want to wake up at 8 a.m. I don't think it'll really fit with my schedule. It might be too many units, but just take classes that interest you. Like I was econ and film, but there were some psychology classes. I was like, oh, this sounds super interesting, but just never took them. So just trying to explore, but I mean, mostly have fun. I mean, we're working in the real world when you're working 8 hours a day. I mean, it's great to have the extra revenue, but enjoy sleeping in, just hang out with your friends. You all live together next to each other while COVID safe, of course. But I mean, just enjoying those aspects and meeting as many people as you can, because you never know. Again, you never know who you meet, who could help you in the future or just stay connected with for a while. So I would just say, meet new people, have a good time, watch some UCLA sports. You can't go wrong.
No doubt. I love all that. And also, I'm sure you're seeing too, like some of these people go on and like start doing really cool startups and companies and all that. Like that's what's so cool about being in a place like UCLA as well, which obviously we all know it's a part of the brochure or whatever. But I see Arathi here has a good question. What is that? He says he knows she knows that some companies ask about what your weaknesses are. And what would you say is the best way to answer this question while still not completely putting yourself down or making yourself seem like a bad candidate?
That's a great question. I think first of all, for this question, they want to see honesty. You can't say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. So like sometimes I try a little hard, but then that happens. They don't like that. You have to kind of put yourself down at some point. But what I would do is a lot of things I always said as my weakness on a resume was sometimes time management. I feel like sometimes I overload my plate and I get overwhelmed with things, but I'm working on this by scheduling, prioritizing everything I'm doing. And because of that, I was able to, at the NFL, I made up some very clever answer. Like I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think it's just being honest about what your weakness is, but how you're looking to improve that and how you have improved that. Something you're still working on. Obviously, nobody's perfect, but I'm working on it by doing this. I think that's the most important thing you can do. But be honest, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, obviously you've got a lot more experience in like the workforce than myself and some of our peers. One thing I've kind of noticed too is people really seem to appreciate self-awareness. Have you noticed that in your career so far? Just being aware of who you are and things like that, your strengths, weaknesses, and all that.
100%. I mean, nobody wants someone they think they know everything. Like even myself, like you mentioned, I have a lot of experience. I'm still learning like new stuff every single day. I know I'm at the bottom of the food chain at the MLB, and I like nothing is perfect. There's always ways you can improve your resume. There's always ways you can reach out with better people, work harder. I think it's just finding a way to like learn as much as you can. Like what I do is when I'm at the MLB, and what you have to do in any internship is get coffee or lunch, put time in people's calendar. You should learn how to do that on Outlook with as many people as possible. Don't even have to be in your department. Just pick their brain and learn about what they know, because then you're taking their knowledge and then just putting it all together. It's super important, and people are flattered, honestly. When I interned at the NFL, that's when I really found out that's where you put time in people's calendar. I found out like halfway through. By that time, it was too late. But some people in my department were like, "Why did you never get coffee with me? Like, why did you never?" They like that kind of stuff, and they like seeing that you're interested in them. So just getting a background on them and seeing what has worked for them, their upbringing. It's interesting. And you, first of all, connecting with people, which is like making those meaningful connections, is what it's all about. Sports is a relationship based industry, but you're also gaining all their knowledge, and it's interesting. Like, we all work in sports, so like you're just hearing about their best experiences, what they like. No, I mean, people are honest too. Like, not sports isn't always the perfect industry, so hearing about how things can be better and just working on those random things. So I would say just make sure you're networking with people all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Network, network, network. Thinking about some of those like coffees and lunches and whatnot, that actually leads me to think about what advice would you have to say for how best to carry yourself in professional environments, whether it be in the office or in meetings, happy hours, conferences, you name it.
I would say big two pieces of advice, and I got both of these. We had a Q when I interned at the NFL. I was fortunate enough to have a Q&A with Roger Goodell. He's actually a very nice guy. He has a very wrong connotation. Like, he's actually a very nice person. Like, I intentionally sat across from him at this big table. And then I raised my hand at the end. He's like, "Yes, you." And everyone turned their head towards me. The only thing in my line of sight was Roger Goodell. I blacked out. I literally have never been so scared to speak. And I asked him, like, straight up, like, what motivates you and like how you work. And he was talking about, he's like, the opportunity to get better. You always have to challenge yourself, seek on new work, ask for work, ask your manager to be like, "Hey, this really interests me. Like, can I try doing this?" Or, "Hey, did you see this?" Just finding new things that challenge you and interest you and just taking those on. People love to see that initiative, and it really stands out. So I think going the extra mile, that's the biggest thing, because people want to see, like, when I keep going back to when I interned at the NFL, because like I feel like it's the most applicable, but I would make sure I was the first to clock in every day. I would get in 20 minutes early and stay late. Now, you don't have to, like, you can still have a life. Obviously, you don't have to do that every single day, but making sure people know you're going the extra mile and you're trying really hard, I think is super important. And then again, I sound like a repeating drum, but I mean, just making meaningful connections, like getting coffee with as many people. That's the biggest thing, is meeting those people and having a relationship with them, because that carries on. Like, obviously what you learn during the internship is important, but those relationships, being able to be like, "Hey, Cynthia, hope you're doing well. I remember when we worked together." It doesn't have to be as formal as that, but just having those connections, those are tangible, and that they can introduce you to other people. Those are super important. But I would say be humble, go the extra mile, and once again, get now. Even also, you don't have to drink coffee. You can get like water, something like that. But
Yeah.
it's important.
I like it. I like the theme about humility as well. How would you say like one could go about kind of doing a humble brag, whether it be like having a senior advisor notice something, or let's say on LinkedIn, you just completed some really cool projects, something like that. How would you advise going about that?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the scenario. You don't want to be doing it too frequently. But one thing I did to start out was I would subscribe to Sports Business Journal. Like, I had my old boss's login. Like, he let me do that. But then I would send my new manager a certain link that I thought would be applicable, and be like, "Hey, saw this on the internet, didn't know if this was irrelevant to the team, but thought you would take a look at it," and do all the work, summarize it in bullet points so they can just look at it and be like, "Okay, that's interesting." You can see he's trying hard. Maybe make a deck. You're working on something and you have an idea. Maybe make a random deck if you have time to show them off, or learn a new LinkedIn or Excel skill to show off. I think you can really go the extra mile in a lot of different ways. Something I do now, even though I'm not an intern, when the team's thirsty, I go get water for people and be like, "Oh, does anyone need a fill up?" I carry 4 water bottles at a time, not because like I feel forced to or the pressure, not at all. It's literally just because I want to do something nice for them, and just, it's not, again, to show off or anything. It's just doing nice things for people also goes a really long way and shows that you're thinking about them. So being able to do that and just, again, go the extra mile, think outside the box. Those really help you stand out.
Yeah, be a team player. I like
Also,
it.
I just thought of something else too to stand out.
Sure.
Something that really helped me when I interned with the NFL is we would have different Q&A sessions when different groups like player health and safety or labor operations. They would speak and present on their group. Always ask questions. Show you're interested. That helped me a lot because when I reconnected with the head of talent acquisition there, she remembers like, oh my God, Quinten, you were always asking questions. Like we know how like talented you are, like how interested you are in everything. So just being able to show an interest in stuff also goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. Just shifting a little bit to thinking about your experience abroad. Can you kind of walk us through what that was like and maybe some takeaways from it and maybe any new perspectives you gained on how we do things here in the States?
I'm really glad you asked this. If you the younger people, I know it's probably too late for the juniors and seniors. Study abroad if you can. I cannot recommend it enough. Being from Westwood, also like I had always been in that shell, but when you're abroad, for some reason you're like, oh, I'm abroad. I'm just gonna try everything, and you just get open to so many different experiences. I studied abroad at Sussex. So I was in Southern England, but traveled everywhere and just seeing the different cultures, meeting different people. I lived in a flat with nobody else was American. Like they were, everyone was from a different country. With someone from Wales, Thailand, Nigeria, and just living in the same space as people and like being on your own in different part of the world. It's an amazing experience, and I think I look back fondly on it. I was super free back then. I could just travel, drink wine during the day when we didn't have class. So like it was amazing. It was amazing. I would say I recommend it for everyone. Just being able to explore, even if you're interested in Europe and after you graduate, just travel around, explore, get lost, and immerse yourself. I sound like I'm preaching, but I love it. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And I feel like even if the biggest takeaway is just you had some really cool, fun times, that's like at least great stuff to talk about with people and connect on, I would assume, right?
Exactly. Because travel is one of those. Also, what I do on my resume, I have interests as a thing. You should just talk about stuff you're passionate about. Travel is always a good one to talk to. And they're like, oh, I saw you traveled a lot when you travel when you were abroad, and then talk about the different countries you went to. It's like, oh yeah, I'd been to Lisbon before, like amazing beaches, like, oh, Croatia, underratedly beautiful, Germany, great food, stuff like that. Great talking point.
Yeah, get some deep connections going. I see Nick Kahn's got his hand up. Nick, would you like to ask a question?
Hi, yeah. First of all, really appreciate, the things you're saying. Definitely, even though being a senior, hearing kind of stuff you're talking about, I'm like, wow, I wish I knew some of those things going into, the job process. Kind of moving a little bit away from that, I had a question. I'm writing a paper about the MLB lockout, and I'm working on talking about the sides and looking at that. But I wanted to know how your position was directly impacted by it. Are people less likely to spend sponsorship dollars, or are people all waiting to see what happens? Kind of how has your job been affected by that?
Totally. That's a great question. Unfortunately, I can't comment on the logistics of the lockout, but luckily my job has not been impacted and business is still going as normal. So that's as much as I can say. I wish I could help you out, but luckily nothing has been impacted in terms of my role.
Awesome. Well, maybe for some who don't know, like the lockout and the extent of it and what it is, can you kind of walk us through that?
I mean, personally, I again, like as an MLB employee, I'm not allowed to like go into details of it, but right now they're having a labor negotiation with the league office, which is where I work, and the players. So once they reach a new deal, obviously the season can resume as normal. But right now they have their collective bargaining agreement expired in December. So they need to make a new deal and agree on certain terms for labor to resume. So right now they're still under negotiations, but I think things will be there soon.
And yeah, absolutely. In other words, could you maybe say it's kind of like a union going on strike or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily a strike, but they're negotiating, trying to make sure that there's a deal that works for both sides. Definitely.
Absolutely. I see Nick's hand is back up. What would you like to ask, buddy?
Yeah, I guess so. My second questions, and so I worked for 2 years in partnerships. I worked on the team side, so helping various teams bring in partnerships. And I saw throughout the pandemic kind of a change in how they were spending their dollars. How have you seen since you've started? And I know it's relatively new, but how have you seen that shift? Are people more willing to spend sponsorship dollars, or things kind of shifting back as if business is more back to normal, or has there been kind of an overall shift in the industry in general?
Yeah, so that's a great question again. Love the partnerships touch point. So I started in August 2021 with the team, and from also like seeing the off-season negotiations with different partners, things are like as normal as they've ever been, if not even better, especially with too. There's different way as sponsorship, a lot of it's heavy on advertising, and now with streaming too, there's different ways to reach customers, geo targeting, everything. So there's different ways to reach different fans all across the country. So fans have been really, partners have been spending a lot with MLB. So business has been as good as normal. I think it was a lot worse. I know 2020 was like it wasn't like a normal year, obviously, compared to 2019, where it was lower, but now it's back to normal, if not even doing better, because the MLB is actually doing great. Not to plug the MLB, but obviously like they're doing great. Like ratings are high up. They did even better than the NBA finals. So a lot of partners are more than willing to spend right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that. Thinking a little bit, actually, here, Brent's got a question in the chat. I'll read real quick. Do you have any unique ideas for increasing MLB partnership outreach towards regions like Europe, where baseball isn't necessarily the dominant sport?
Yeah, totally. Personally, for my role itself, I only work domestically, but I know our international team has been big on reaching out to Europe, because it's like you look back on what they did in, I think it was 2018 or 2017. They had the Yankees versus Red Sox in Wembley Stadium in
Wow.
London, and the score of that game was like 13-12. It was absolutely insane, like home runs flying everywhere. So doing more events in Europe, I think, is a great way to reach it, but also going back to my experience in media strategy, doing more of a broadcast reach, whether it could be something as small as social, just posting highlights throughout a certain DMA internationally, or it could be licensing the rights off. Like you could see people in France having like MLB games, but I think it's about really marketing and having events there, because it's hard for people to stay connected when the games start at like 2 a.m. their time. So I think it's about finding ways that we can tangibly reach them with events in different cities, or maybe a tour of some sort, or just reaching out, expanding their broadcast rights. Definitely.
For sure. Yeah. Seeing some more baseball in Europe would certainly be cool.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm kind of curious with regards to like the differences between, some of these larger, nationwide TV companies, like let's say like ESPN, which is owned by like Disney and all that, versus like, let's say Sportsnet. What are some of the biggest differences, would you say, in how those places operate, if there are any, or maybe they're similar? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, definitely. Working on the network side, that was a great place to start, because it was just focused on one aspect of it. Obviously, working in the NFL, MLB, you work with the entire league, but focusing on just the LA region and saying, okay, how can we reach casual fans? How can we reach casual viewers, different demographics, understanding what motivates them? Can we leverage a news portfolio sort of targeting a certain part of LA? I think it's really interesting, because ESPN, it's a like you said, it's a conglomerate. Like it reaches so many different places. But Spectrum, even though it's owned by Charter Communications, which Spectrum obviously in itself is already a big name, it works locally, and just it's very tied into the community, which I think is super important, because it's like very LA focused. And I think that's a big thing about sports, why people have pride in their teams, is going back to the community aspect. Like, again, my dad's from Green Bay. Like, obviously that's his culture. That's what he passed down to me. So just, I think being tied with the community is something that the network's really honed in on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And I guess staying in the media space a little bit, that ESPNU Campus Connection video you did, I was able to watch. I thought it was really cool. For any of you who haven't seen it, I would recommend going to Quinten's LinkedIn page, where hopefully you're already going to it and shooting him an invite to connect, but scroll down a little and check out that Campus Connection video. I was kind of curious how, and I think you might have alluded to it a little bit earlier, how you landed that opportunity and kind of what it was like and what you took away from it.
Totally. I think, again, the ESPNU connection was a lot of my jobs I got were super random. Like it just came out of nowhere. So when I interned at Spectrum, it was like a group of interns. I wasn't the only one. I was the only one in my department, but there was a group, and there was a girl named Cambria who went to UNC Chapel Hill, but came back to LA for the internship, and she was in production. And ESPNU had a nationwide program going on called Campus Connection, where you work with a marketing producer on sort of representing each school. Like there was someone at Penn State who was on the sidelines for games, and like Temple is like random schools. And I was like,
Yeah.
no one's doing this for UCLA. Like I want to see if I can reach out and do this.
Yeah.
And literally it was, I reached out, I asked Cambria for the contact, got the guy's contact. He's like, oh yeah, sure. Like you can go rent this camera on campus here and then go shoot. He got me the credentials, everything. It was as random as it, they discontinued that program when I was a senior, but looking for random things like that, where you can just sort of, I'm passionate about videography. I love photography, videography. So I was like, oh, this is like easy for me. So I think just finding different niche things like that are going on in the country and then just bringing that to UCLA, super cool. Like I think Cambria also started this thing called Uncut, which was Uncut Chapel, was like they interview athletes, and she brought that to UCLA. I like, again, she asked for me for, do you have connections to random people? So I was just like, threw it to some people, and then I think it's there now. So I think just finding those random niche things for the younger guys.
Yeah, most definitely. Would you say it might be sound advice for some of our members who are interested in like sports media and things like that, to maybe just try and shoot their shots with some of these athletes and coaches and try and get interviews and sit downs and whatnot?
100%. I mean, it's like Dion Waiters quotes, like, I'd rather be 0 for 100 than 0 for 9. Like you just gotta, it showed you lost confidence. Always have confidence. I think also another tip I got, like I was speaking, when I was job hunting in 2020, I spoke to this guy from Red Bull, and he's like, you gotta be absolutely shameless. Like you can be on borderline annoying in terms of reaching out to people, but just be shameless. I mean, like at the end of the day, this is your career. It's important to you. And that a lot of people understand that, especially UCLA alumni who you might want to reach out to, but it doesn't have to be UCLA alumni. It could just be any random person. It could be a high level person. It could be an athlete. Any connection you have, you never know.
Yeah, definitely. Thinking a little bit about your partnership activation process and whatnot, can you kind of walk us through how that usually works from start to finish?
Absolutely. So partnership activation is, it's a loaded group. So what we basically do is we're in the umbrella of sponsorship within the MLB. So the MLB has a lot of official corporate partners, like a Geico, they have Hankook Tire, they have Spot Hero, they have MasterCard, like there's so many different random partners who pay the MLB for certain just rights fees. So they can, it could be Geico's the presenting sponsor of the Field of Dreams games. That could be one example of an activation, but they pay the MLB a certain fee to have a certain media plan. So it could be website ads, it could be ads on broadcast TV, it could be partnerships with players. Like for Gatorade, they do a lot of stuff with Fernando Tatis, Francisco Lindor. So after those deals are made, that's where my team comes in, and we're the partnership activation team. So we work directly with the client. So we work with the Gatorade, we work with the Bank of America, just all the different clients on activating their media plans that they want to do to make sure that they get what they spent their money for. And then also we look at seeing, okay, how are certain campaigns doing? How are Fleet Farms ads on brewers.com doing? Are they going to be reach on time? And then we also report back how they finished doing. So we do a lot of recap decks to pitch like, hey, Delta, we had this plan and it got X many impressions, this many engagements. The Braves won the World Series. They had your logo everywhere. Just sort of pitching that and seeing like how it's important, I think is something super important for us. So in my role specifically, we don't do the actual sale to the partner. Like that's our corporate partnerships team, but we work directly with the client. So I'm talking to different clients or agencies every single day. Like that's literally what I do. But just being able to communicate, like if you're working on something, you can be like, confirming receipt, like we got this, we'll get this over to you soon. And a lot of things pile up, but just communicating, like saying like, hey, I'm working on this, hey, is there anything I can do for you, is super important, just to make sure that not even the client is happy from a business standpoint, but just like you're working with people, again, just making sure people like you and that you reflect well on the MLB or whatever organization you're in.
Yeah, no doubt. I like that. And what would you say, because this is something on a personal level I've considered, I know some of my fellow executive board members and general members have considered as well. What are some of the biggest differences between working for like the league entity and that organization versus like an individual team?
Exactly. I think so. I mean, I haven't specifically worked for a team, but like I'm comparing to working at Spectrum. I think with the league, there's a lot more moving parts because we as a person on the partnership activation team, I still work with individual teams. Like my 4 teams I work with are Brewers, Tigers, Rockies, and Guardians. Not they're good Guardians.
Gotcha,
But
gotcha.
just like I would say working with the league, you doing so many different stuff with different partners. I mean, the teams itself, they still have corporate partnerships. They still have signage everywhere. They're doing different media plans, but I think it's a lot smaller. But I think in like with the league, it's like the deals naturally are bigger numbers. But like working with the team, I think it's again more community based, seeing how we can reach local fans, which I think is a super interesting aspect, and just seeing how we can improve the team, how we can leverage the Dodgers winning the World Series in 2020. How do we go off of that? And just like big impactful on the team. One of my friends who works at the Dodgers, her name is Tess. I was in PAC with her, always wanted to work in sports. She was now working there, so I'm really happy for her. But she's just saying like working for a team is super amazing. Like working for the Dodgers during and being there for a playoff game, walking around the concourse as they hit a walk-off against the Cardinals. Like that was a crazy game, but just like the spirit there, everyone's really united. Sometimes I think with the league, you might get lost in like it's a business. You're not as connected to one particular team. But I think with the league, you see like a breadth of so many different experiences. And then with the team, you're really focused in on the community.
Yeah, certainly sounds like there's some pros and cons to each. And one of my takeaways that I'm getting from maybe what you're saying is, sounds like maybe the league's a little more consistent. You know, the highs aren't as high, but also the lows aren't as low.
Yeah.
Whereas on the teams, maybe you get a lot more of that roller coaster going.
Exactly. And I think it's just sports in general. It's like a crazy concept if you think about it. Like the business of your team can be almost winning the World Series one year, and then they could be like in last place in their division the next year. And then like the business fluctuates based on that. So I would say there's a lot of fluctuations within teams, but overall, like the league, as the league, we support all of our teams and try to help them out as much as we can too.
Yeah. So I'm a big Red Sox fan. I remember like 2012, I think we were one of the worst teams. In 2013, we won it all. So it's crazy. Hopefully none of your neighbors who are Yankee fans heard that.
No.
Yeah, I see Tom's hand is up. Tom, do you want to ask a question?
Oh yeah. Hey Quinten. So circling back to your to what you talked about in your role as in partnerships activation. So I was just wondering, working with the various clients, do you have like was there like a favorite partner or something that was very memorable or interesting as a result of an activation / deal that you worked on?
That's a great question. I would say, I mean, I don't really have a particular favorite partner. I mean, I honestly like all of them. Some ask for stuff more than others, but I would just say a lot of what you can do is just being proactive on getting what they need to them. So a lot of clients, they want to know how their deals are performing. Like just telling them, hey, this is the reporting before they even ask really goes a long way. Or they need to allocate certain ads to certain brands, being like, hey T-Mobile, like we did this already. Just like knowing you're thinking about them. It's a balancing act, because like you're not working with 1 or 2 partners. You could be working with over 50 at a time. So just keeping track and staying organized of what partners need what and how you can provide value to them. Even as a young person, like as young people, like we can still provide so much value to companies. Like what we do, it's not always glamorous, but it's super necessary for the league to function. Even though like most of our group is coordinators, and they're between 23, I'm like the youngest one, and 27. Just finding your way to see how you can just be helpful. And even like now, what I do with Outlook is just sending smiley faces, making people feel happy as much as I can. That's what I can do. Even some people might, if you're on Gmail, it's not as professional, but like even just like throwing smiley faces, people like throw smiley face back, or people just talk about random stuff with you. I mean, just making sure the client's happy is bottom line, but just doing what you can to stay proactive.
Definitely.
Yeah, just keeping that energy up. Thank you.
Of course.
I'll ask a question. I see Kate's hand is up. Kate, would you like to ask a question? Or maybe that was an accident. No worries. Okay, it looks like it might have been an accident. I'm kind of curious, bringing it back to your time as a Bruin a little bit. What was your favorite memory while you were an undergrad here?
Favorite memory. That's so
Or
tough.
maybe top couple. Who knows?
There were so many. I would say, okay, I'll give you my favorite sports memories and my favorite. I mean, again, I pitched pack, but I actually did love dance marathon. Doing that in 2018, just like all the music, everything. It was such a like a joyous experience, and just being with so many students. Like the fact students put that on and all the music flowing, that was like sensational. Favorite sports memories, I would say when UCLA beat USC my junior year, that was awesome. That was the only time they beat them while I was there. Glad to see that they whooped him pretty good this year. Love that. But then also my freshman year, this is aging me a little bit. Lonzo, that's when he was on campus. So him, TJ Leaf, everyone, and they had the lockout at Pauley Pavilion the night before. So you could stay in Pauley Pavilion until 2 a.m. to get like a preferred seat. So I did that. Next day, that's when Dylan Brooks also was on Oregon. So they were up by 18 in the first half, and we were just getting demolished. And I was like, I can't believe I stayed up till 2 a.m. for this. And then we roared back, won that game. That was so electric. Like it was just being in the arena, like made me so happy to be at UCLA. Also, when we came back and beat Washington State down 49-17, that was unreal. I mean, UCLA has so many memories. Like I was so sad I wasn't there for when they were in the Final Four last year. Like envious of all you guys, but there was just so many great times, and that's non-sports related, just finding ways to just do random stuff. I mean, UCLA is the best. I look with so many fond memories.
Yeah, such a good balance of academic, professional, and athletic, and just fun social opportunities.
Yeah.
No doubt. And those were some awesome sports memories you just touched on, especially that Lonzo comeback, SC demolishing them, all that feels great. I was kind of curious as well, for those of us graduating this year, and maybe for some of the upperclassmen as well, what advice would you share with us for as we approach our last couple months of undergrad? Maybe some things we should really pay attention to or take full advantage of, whatever that may look like.
Definitely. I think there's twofold of what you can do. If you're, say, you're looking for a job, you want to figure out what you want to do after graduation. Honestly, if you can, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing if you just take some time after you graduate to just sort of relax yourself, decompress from college. I mean, it was like such a long time and you work so hard. So maybe just travel, explore, find what you're interested in, but also just keep in mind, like, think about where you want to end up. Do you want to stay in LA? Maybe you want to move to a different city. Maybe you want to go back home. Just think about where you want your future to go and just sort of what problems you want to solve. I'm sure obviously you want to work in sports. So just seeing any opportunity that's out there. I think a lot of times people will be like, oh, I want to work for the Clippers, and they look straight at the Clippers jobs. You can definitely do that, but see what's available at certain times. Like not necessarily, a lot of times when sports companies are hiring, they're hiring for right away. So it might not be the worst thing if you're, say you graduated in June and you're still looking for jobs in September, October, that's perfectly fine. You can just say like, look, I was taking time to relax, just sort of unwind, like take a gap year. I think is not necessarily a bad thing, but trying to figure out where you want to be, what city you want to be, and then sort of seeing what opportunities are out there. When you look for a job on LinkedIn, especially in job hunting, never just apply blindly. Never do that. You see the title or the group of the job, reach out to those people on LinkedIn. Even if they don't respond, it's okay. You're still putting yourself out there, just reaching out. But most of all, I would say just enjoy your last few months of college. I think it's rare you get to live next to all your friends at once. So just being able to go to the beach a lot more, especially if you're moving out of the city. Being from LA, living in New York now, that's the one thing I miss. Like we had the beach so conveniently there. Go to, they're not called Jans anymore, Tongva, or do they change back from there? Just going out there.
I think it's Tongva or whatever, yeah.
Or Tongva, yeah. Go there, just enjoy, do some charcuterie, maybe relax, play spike ball. Think of random things you can do. Go to Rocco's. I don't know if it's still open, but like just
Still is. Yeah, still is.
do as much as you can just to enjoy those few months, and just don't put too much pressure on yourself. I think a lot of times what I did was I was like, oh my God, I had all this experience and I'm unemployed. Like I'm like my self-worth, it would just be depleted. But just never forget like who you are. Like at the end of the day, everyone in this call, like we go to UCLA. UCLA is not just any other university. This is the top public university in the country. You already stand out. Believe in yourself, and just no matter what happens. You mentioned this even before we started. Everything happens for a reason. Everything timing. There's no such thing as wrong timing, slow timing. Everything works out perfectly how it's supposed to. I look back and look on my year or searching of jobs. Like it was horrible and I hated it while I was doing it. But like when I got offered by the NFL to start again in the MLB, like nothing felt more gratifying. I felt vindicated. So just know everything itself is going to be fine. Just enjoy yourself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Remember, we're all Bruins. I mean, we're all strong candidates. Don't forget that.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And thanks for reminding us of that. And obviously it seems to be helping you as well. I like that idea too, of taking advantage of these last couple of months and join them while we got them and this freedom and things like that. And also for those who may not know, those Tomlin steps, skip the 6-1 if you're superstitious at all. Don't touch that. I guess if it's all right with you, just one or two more. I know we're a little over right now. This next one should be pretty short. It's kind of just a for fun one. Easiest GEs while you were at UCLA.
Oh God, I have to think about this. Actually, my freshman year I took Ling 1. That one wasn't that bad. Okay, honestly, like I loved my film minor, not only because it was interesting, but a lot of the film classes are really not that difficult. Like one of my favorite ones I thought, because I saw the grading scale. A lot of them, if you look on, I forgot what it's called, Bruin Walk. Is that the site where you can check the grades?
Yeah.
But like look on those and see a lot of the film ones, the film upper divs, those ones really, really help. Like film, I'm saying, yeah, film TV 33. Like that's yeah. All the film ones are super like interesting. You're watching a lot of movies, but they're not as difficult. Like cinematography, I forgot what number that is. It's like I think it's like film 120 something, 122D. It's like you see everything differently. It's just like how a movie is created to look visually. Like now when I watch Euphoria, I'm like, wow, like I understand all the effects, like the bokeh, everything. Just finding stuff like you can find a G that's easy, but also something that's interesting. Like, I mean, maybe you're not as interested in like Scan 50 or something like that, but just finding stuff that interests you. I didn't take that one, but like it's like, again, I think a lot of the film ones are definitely recommend.
Yeah, I like that. You're the second person. All my coworkers watch Euphoria. It sounds like I need to
get
on top of that.
Everything on Twitter is Euphoria now. It's a religious experience. It's beautiful.
Wow. Okay, duly noted. And a final question of the night would just be, do you have any final parting takeaways or action steps that you want to leave us with tonight that we can maybe act on and start working toward?
I would say, I mean, if you're job hunting right now, I would say, first of all, I would look at your resume, just try to see how you can tweak it. One of resume tip, always use a different verb every time you use like a different, like you're describing a certain task. So maybe look at your resume again, update your LinkedIn, make sure that's up to date. All your jobs are in there, put your resume in your bio, make sure you get to 500 plus and just reach out to and find what interests you. You don't have to necessarily apply to jobs, but look at different people in different companies, see what they do, see if you can connect with them, or even just see, oh, maybe this interests me, see what different jobs are out there. You don't have to apply. Again, just reading job descriptions. Also looking at SBJ, 40 under 40. That was one of the most inspiring things I've ever done in sports, or just reading about what people have accomplished and what they've done. Because there's so many different opportunities in sports. A lot, again, people think it's like, oh, broadcasting, agent, athlete, coach. Like, no, there's so many different aspects. And just like finding those out and just connecting with UCLA people too. UCLA people are so friendly, and sometimes you might get ghosted, like is what it is, but just leveraging those connections and just trying to meet with people. I think those are the biggest takeaways, but most of all, just enjoy college while you can. I know things are going to be opening up again next week too. So just find a way to have fun too.
Yeah. I like all those notes, especially, network, review the res, all that stuff. For those who may not understand, when he was mentioning 500 plus, that's 500 more connections on LinkedIn, getting that going. But all in all, really good stuff. And Quinten, we can't thank you enough for one, getting on the call tonight, and two, just your authenticity and openness with all that you shared. We really appreciate it. It's definitely, I can already tell it's going to help me. It's going to help a lot of our members. So thanks so much.
More than happy to help. I appreciate you guys inviting me. If you guys ever need anything, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Paul has my number. So I mean, like whatever you guys need.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And real quick, we'll say goodbye to you. And then for the rest of our members, we'll stay on, but thanks and go Bruins.
All right. Perfect. Go Bruins.
Take care. All righty. Real quick, we'll just wrap this up. A couple announcements. You guys know the main ones, so don't need to go through them all, but real quick, next week, no formal meeting because of midterms and stuff like that. We'll just be having office hours and a midi watch party on Wednesday at 6. It should be in bunch 3170. We should be having confirmation on that shortly. And then also, we're going to be hosting a social at Barney's on Wednesday of week 6 at 6 p.m. Pacific time. We would just ask that right now, if you're interested at all, feel free to RSVP using that QR code right there. You can come for a short or as long as you want. It's a nice little opportunity to get to socialize with some of your fellow BSBA members. So I'll leave that up for just a couple more seconds, and then I'll switch slides. All right, yeah, so we'd love to see you guys at that if possible. Also, the real cool opportunity, you guys know about this one, the Anderson School one at the Pulse Conference. A great opportunity to go and network like Quinten was just alluding to earlier. You got the QR code right there. It's also in the newsletters. So that'd be a great opportunity for everyone. A quick reminder of our attendance policy. You guys know what that looks like already. So I'll move on. And yeah, just once again, want to say a big thank you for everyone who joined tonight. And hope you guys all have a great rest of your week 4 and good luck on midterms.